I'm curious, Saida, in your own personal journey, were there times when you felt, I mean, I know a little bit of this, but in this way, did you notice impatience and like, oh, this should be happening faster. Why am I not farther into where I think I'm supposed to be? Or did it just all make sense?
Definitely yes, but I'm a kapha dosha, so I'm like tomorrow. I'm gonna do
Yeah.
tomorrow. That's part of my dosha. So I think, but there is that reconciliation of where you think society and is wanting you to be, and then there can be that impatience for sure. I'm more impatient with others and more patient with myself. Like
Oh,
Mm.
for me,
nice.
I'm like, oh, I'll get to it tomorrow. But others, I'm like, why isn't it done already? Horrible, horrible trait.
Yeah.
No, I think it's beautiful that you can have that kind of, I mean, as long as it's not
That's
procrastination, that's
say that I relate to her because that's how I
okay.
am and I procrastinate.
But is it procrastination for you or is it being
I
more
don't even
difficult?
use that word. Sorry.
Oh,
Okay,
good.
then it's
It's
not.
just how I am.
It's your pace.
It's my space. Because, right, procrastination then really means I'm truly buying into what other people think I should be. And
Oh, I love
maybe
it.
back in the past, I had that, but I don't feel that at this point. And then so there's a level of where I want to approve upon myself for myself, this sort of internal self mastery, but it's not necessarily on somebody else's schedule. But I'm older now too.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah,
Thank you for saying that. Yeah.
you're welcome.
My ears are interpreting it as that you have found a way to give yourself compassion and care by not pushing to make something happen. But the part that maybe is the evolving edge is for you to also give that to others, where it's like, well, they didn't do it in the timeline that I wanted. Okay, I'm gonna just be okay with that.
Well,
And
and
that,
part of the thing that I think, and seriously, if we end up doing this workshop, part of the thing that I want to add into it is there's this concept of pushing oneself, but it's like what's behind the pushing, and can I be motivated by this deep sense of love and
Yeah.
evolution, or am I fearful and you know kind of pushing myself because I don't want people to think certain things, or I don't,
Mm.
so if it's true that love based encouragement, then I'm excited to jump into the next thing.
I like that a lot. And where do we get to that? How do we get to that point to know that it's coming from love or it's coming from,
I'm
you know,
designing the course now.
you're like, give me a minute, I'm trying to lay it out. I'm loving this. Well, I hope this is encouraging the format to be, uh, envisioned because I think that's the thing is like, okay, so now we, intellectually understand there's a way and an approach. So what is that so that we can then, it's like everything I've learned from part of it from, talking about October 7th stuff, but also talking about yoga, talking about my personal journey. What happened? How far back can we go to recognize where the imbalance started or where um, the story can begin in a way that helps us make sense of it today?
Well, isn't like the Bhagavad Gita all about that war with cousins on both sides
Right.
and family on both
Yeah.
sides?
That's
Um,
Gita. Mahabharat.
yeah,
Oh, that's what I was going to say. Even that in this particular reference, the Bhagavad Gita that's inside of the Mahabharata is even more understood when you understand the Mahabharata.
Yeah.
got it.
If you just go with the Bhagavad Gita, I feel like
It's the war.
it's just the story's only about the war. But when you get the context of what was going on with the family and who
Ooh.
came from who and who's related to who and what deities and what,
Yeah.
it's just so beautiful that that's what I'm going through right now is I now have a deeper appreciation to the Gita that I
Mm.
just wouldn't have had, you know.
I'll take that course.
Okay, I do. I'm not nowhere near. have any qualification, but I'd like to at least talk about it.
Yeah,
That's
maybe
right.
that could be the thing, reading.
Just a study group.
Yeah, study group, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I did want to say, based on what Saida you just shared, as I was thinking, like the context, like the bigger picture, back in 2007, I watched this documentary called The Corporation,
Oh
Yeah.
and it talked about a bunch of different. No, I don't think it was that.
Different. Okay.
Yeah. But so they talk about Enron, they talk about one of the things that was definitely very eye-opening for me is they showed these butcher meat houses or whatever, I forget you call it, like the,
Slaughterhouse.
thank you.
I was just gonna say,
Slaughterhouses on the border of Texas, like the US and Mexico, and these illegal immigrants would come in and work. And I use the term to emphasize that there are these factory owners who know these people are not US citizens. They hire them because they don't have to give insurance. And I saw on the documentary that in the slaughterhouses, it's really dangerous. And these people would lose an arm, but they don't have to pay for them. And these people probably get $5 for the whole month. And they show that the closest things nearby were McDonald's or one of like those kinds of things. And what are they eating? And coming to my point, when I used to advocate for environmental justice, climate change, all of that, it was very eye-opening to see how these systems are created, and even abortion, who it impacts the most. And I was shocked to see how many Black women are the ones that are most impacted with childbirth-related issues, mortality. And for me, I felt like tracing down everything, it came down to impacting minorities the most. So
Yes.
yeah, that was eye-opening for me.
And the film is The Corporation.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it talked
sounds
about
familiar. I think I may have seen it a while back.
Yeah.
What you said it was like 10 years ago or something.
I watched it in 2006 or 7, so it must have come at that time. And that time they talked about factory farming too, and I was like, oh wow, yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Well, this is, I mean, in terms of our talks here, it's like, what will it take for us to understand that when we do something that brings harm to one, that it is actually bringing harm to many?
Yeah.
That it's sort of to what you were talking about, that the impact of the things that we're doing, sometimes we don't even see that impact, especially if we're of a certain demographic.
Yeah.
We're maybe even oblivious if we are in a dominant culture, and we haven't had to see some of these things. We haven't had to feel some of these things. So you're like, what? Where's the problem? I think some of that has been shaken up. I think the awakening that happened in 2020 with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and others has made I know for me, I feel more conscious and more aware of who felt impact from that and who really didn't. And it's almost like once you see something like this or know something like this, it feels like there's an imperative. Like I don't know how to say this exactly, but there's a part of me that feels liberated from knowing that that's actually going on. Like seeing a movie like The Corporation, it liberates this blinder from your eyes, and you're like, oh my God, I see.
Yeah.
And that's a form of liberation where there's then a compelling part of you that's like, I can't be ignorant to that. I now see it. I don't know. That's just some thoughts that were coming up.
Often I would do an icebreaker when I teach different classes or conduct a meeting. It doesn't matter. And one of the would you rather than questions is like, would you rather be able to touch an object and feel the history of that object kind of all the way through. And then I think the other one was, would you rather be covered in scales or fur? Like it was
Yeah.
totally separate. And I remember always, oftentimes picking that I wanted to feel an object so that I could understand, like, how it was made, whose lives were impacted. Did it bring someone joy making it, or were they enslaved making it? Was it, so it was just that thing where, how do we have a through line that then connects? Because, right, I think Henry Louis Gates does Finding Your Roots, and people are excited to find out different things about their history, but when they find out something that feels very troubling, it's hard to be like, oh, I have all this money because
Mm.
oh, I come from people who enslaved others,
Yeah.
or like there's just always this interesting impact. And I think in the like the course of it all is, how can we sit with the information, contribute more loving things into the earth, and just understand that that's where we come from. It doesn't have to be the makeup of who we are at this moment, and then be able to and that way you can kind of step forward with a little bit more understanding and agency, and without shame.
Yeah.
So for instance, part of how I was able to tell my story was, I could say, yeah, I come from a line of alcoholics, and not be shameful about it, right? Because I also come from folks who were part of the Black Panthers. And and in a sense, it's the same person, right? So there's all these sort of different journeys. And then you talked about, Mark, of asking why. I was like, oh, why? What pain were my ancestors trying to escape, that drinking was helpful in that way, to not think of some of the oppression, or to experience the oppression that was happening. So there's all those different things where, if we can step into the actual truth of it without shame, then like then you can teach slavery in an American history class
Yes.
without feeling bad. It
Yeah.
was like, oh, this is what's happened, and let's make sure that we don't do this going forward.
Right.
So that's always an interesting part for me.
But I love that. I think it's a great icebreaker to stimulate some deeper level insights, into people's
Hmm.
psyches and where they are. And that kind of conversation, I think it helps us in what I feel is missing in a lot of our connecting with one another, is to have maybe some little bit of challenging discussions, but in the effort to get to know each other better, and to recognize, I think that's a good point, how shame can often be a guiding reason why we don't do things
Yeah.
or do things,
Yeah.
instead of, feeling liberated to just be yourself, be who you are, this collection of, probably a bunch of intense things, you know, and instead of trying to wait to find that person who's been through this perfectly Brady Bunch
Oh,
life,
yeah.
it's like, you know what? That that's only in the TV shows. And even then, if you really look at it, everybody's going through something.
What
Before
if past lives? Oh, sorry.
no, go ahead.
Was it, what if past lives do exist and I was the actual oppressor? Like, I got to deal with that too.
Yeah.
It's that Thich Nhat Hanh poem, Call Me by My True Names. Do you know that poem?
Oh,
To have it somewhere. Yeah, Call Me by My True Names. And he goes through and says, basically, I am the one who's been oppressed, and I'm the one who was the oppressor.
yeah.
He goes through this whole list of, I am the eagle that, or I guess I'm the little rodent that ran through the field, and I'm the eagle that came swooping down and grabbed the rodent.
Yeah.
Yes, 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 yes,
So
yes.
he's finding that awareness that I think, yeah, that was it. I remember hearing that, and that was a shift for me. Um, I often used to say, though, if we're waiting to hear the perfect storyline of any one culture, we're also going to be waiting forever.
Yes.
There have been harms. I mean, if I look at my Japanese ancestry, oh my goodness, brutal, brutal things that Japanese people did, but also brutal things that they also received. Experienced. So it's not like we're trying to wait for who's the perfect one to come forward. I think that sometimes is what I also feel like
I'm still listening, but you mentioned about the Japanese culture. I'm like, oh, I got to get my natto in the fridge so it doesn't.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll be back.
Go
I'm
get your natto.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I have all these like.
It's interesting. I was talking to someone who has some is not Indian, but has a relationship with India, and this person doesn't like India anymore. But one time when we were in a debate, I was just talking about that, what the British did. And they said two things. Oh, you wouldn't have English, And the other thing they said was that, well, you cannot entirely blame the British because the kings, the Indian kings, if they hadn't been pitting against each other, the British wouldn't have been able to take advantage. And my jaw dropped. But sometimes there are people, who will like try to justify or like see, I don't know. It is interesting. And I know they were coming from their experience and they're already. So I also had to remind myself that some of these things come from a hurt place, perhaps. And to your point, they may have been oppressed or whatever they experienced or their relationship or story with India makes the narrative or makes them see different things in different light. So
that's the complicated thing is like you have the same object. We talked about this, and I think Andrea did this in one of our last TLP talks. I've got this kit that you gave me, Saida, this little emergency kit. And if Kinjal and I were going to be looking at this, Kinjal would say, oh, I just see a white box.
Yeah.
What do you see?
Yeah, white box with 4 little bumps on it.
Well, no, but there's this orange label on it that says SF Soda Tax for Health. That's what this is.
No, it's a white box.
No, there's an orange. I see it. What are you talking about, Kinjal?
Right.
And then all of a sudden, we're both like beside ourselves because we're both right.
Yeah.
That's right.
But what we haven't done is explored the complexity of this.
And it's our truth.
Yeah. So then what do? Then it's all done.
Yeah.
We're no longer here. Except this remains. That's what's interesting. For the next generation.
I apologize, it's plastic.
Yeah.
Well, you're moving it along.
I'm moving it along.
I would be colorblind. I would say, oh, this is gray.
Oh,
it's gray. That's right.
It's like, no, it's not, Kinjal. It's orange. It's so bright orange. Yeah. And then that's the next thing you know. I had this, we're down to our last 5 minutes. Yeah. Woo!
Life keeps moving.
I had a Uber driver who is from Senegal today, who and enough, Uber has its own story. We're using Uber, but I used Uber. And but it was fascinating. His father is a mediator in Senegal, and he gets brought to a number of different countries to help mediate between people who basically are in major conflict. And he said it's always a very difficult moment, but it always boils down to the same things. And essentially, one side who is maybe considering peace, and there's the other side who doesn't, and the other side who doesn't want him there. So he has to show up. And it's usually based on some kind of an argument / disagreement that is kind of all that it is. And then it blows up into all the different kinds of possible things that we see. So what if it is either a disagreement or it's just an initial argument?
Yeah.
That's then times 3,000 years. And this is kind of what we then see playing out endlessly. But my hope is that we recognize there are some practices that we all know through yoga, that it's all about helping the mind recognize these things and discern, where am I making these mistakes? So even for Kinjal and I to go, wait a minute, if we both are seeing that, let's take a moment Kinja, why don't you come over here and see what I'm seeing? Why don't I come over? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What about that?
Yeah.
Those are my last words. 3 minutes.
Lovely.
Any final comments on our session today from either of you? Anything that might have been interesting to restate or some new thought that you're left with for next time?
Well, I'm excited that I spoke about a class that I'm interested in teaching, or like crafting and then facilitating. That's going to be interesting. But I think there's some legs there.
I'm going to check in with you and hold you accountable.
For sure.
Yeah. This is official. It's being recorded.
I know. I know. Stay tuned. Thank you.
For me, I think it was just to kind of dig deeper. And I love that, like to maybe at least, you know, like the horse has the blind, like what do you call the blinders on the side, maybe try to see what other perspectives might be there.
Mm.
Thank you for sharing both.
Yeah, well, thank you both for coming to be a part of this. And these happen weekly, and I look forward to just continuing this journey. And if liberation continues to be the theme, or we go back to truth, it's all good, or we find our way to peace.
Yeah.
It's all good. All right. We'll take a moment just to close with feeling our flow of breath together. So recognizing at this moment, even those who are watching, we are inhaling and exhaling. We each have our own breath that helps to keep this body supported and alive. And at the same time, we all are breathing together, having a collective experience. May the entire universe be filled with peace and joy, love and light. And may the light of truth overcome all ignorance. The light in me sees the light in you. Namaste.
Namaste.